Speakers for you tonight. We have Richard Clewett from the Conservatives, Deputy Leader of the Council and Leader of the Climate Emergency Programme. We have Emma Dornay from the Green Party, Tony Mears from Labour, Ian Thorne from the Liberal Democrats, and Graham Wright, who's an independent, so he's not representing the independents, because obviously that would be almost a contradiction in terms, but he's here to represent the fact that there are many independents on the council and independent candidates, but he's speaking obviously in his own capacity tonight. And we should have about 100 people or so listening in either via Zoom or via Facebook. So welcome to you all. Thanks for coming along. You will have an opportunity to submit your comments via the Facebook chat function as we go through the agenda. We are recording this, so many more people will be able to listen to the replay or watch the replay via our website after this. Just a couple of introductory remarks then. Climate change is not a party political issue, and Wiltshire Climate Alliance is certainly not a party political organisation in any respect. We are completely apolitical, and we, as we have been doing, will work constructively with the council and anybody else, irrespective of party. So climate change is not a party political issue. And just to illustrate that, I'd like to show you just 4 quotations that are just coming up on the screen in front of you now. The question, if you just give me all those 4. Now, these quotations are recent quotations from Sean Berry of the Green Party, Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Boris Johnson, needs probably no introduction, and Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. I'm not attributing, oh, sorry, they've just been attributed. Sorry, I didn't intend to do that.
Oh, sorry.
That's right, we jumped ahead of ourselves. The point I was making before that was slight glitch was, it doesn't actually matter who's saying what. The point is they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying this is a global climate emergency and we need to act now. And that's really what this debate is about. And actually, having read the manifestos of the 4 parties represented here tonight, the local manifestos, that is, from Wiltshire, they're all pretty much saying the same thing as well, to varying degrees, and that's obviously something we can debate. But the point is, this debate is not about whether the climate emergency is happening, or even when we need to do something about it. It's about how we do something about it. So I'm expecting this to be a constructive and serious debate about the how, and not a debate about whether or not we need to do this. The councillors who were elected in May and the council who will be taking charge of the council will be responsible for delivering on the climate emergency in the next 4 years. Local authorities obviously have a critical role. It's obviously not the only role. We need national government to be supportive of that. We need international collaboration. But local authorities do have an absolutely critical role, because they're responsible for so many decisions that affect emissions, from housing to transport to land use to planning for commercial and industrial projects and so on. So what the council does is absolutely critical to carbon emissions in Wiltshire, and clearly that can be multiplied across the whole country, every local authority, and that's what will make the difference to the UK's emissions, and therefore by consequence what will make the difference to global emissions. So if meaningful action isn't taken starting right away to start reducing emissions significantly year on year, and certainly during the term of the next council, it will actually be too late to meet the targets for 2030 and beyond. And as I'm sure most of you know, the UK's 6th carbon budget set by the Climate Change Committee requires emission reductions of 68% by 2030 on the way to net zero by 2050. And while 2050 might sound a long way away, getting there within that carbon budget means really, really major reductions every year from now. And the longer we leave it, the bigger the reductions have to be. So as I said, this is not a party political issue, and it would be really great to see a cross-party consensus, not just now, but particularly after the election, as these policies and plans are formulated and implemented. And I do hope this debate will reflect that consensus. There may well be disagreement about individual policies and how we go about it. But I hope we'll be discussing practical plans and actions rather than petty squabbling or point scoring of political points, because the climate emergency is urgent and it is serious. And as your party leaders agree, as we saw in those quotations, we need to just get on with it. So let's put aside our differences and work out how we're going to respond to that. So just flicking back to the agenda, Christian, the first item is for each candidate to give a quick introduction, no more than 3 minutes, just to say their own personal view about the climate emergency, the urgency of dealing with it, and where they're coming from if re-elected, to what they will do differently to deliver on the climate emergency after the election. We sent out some rules. Basically, we'd just like this debate to be conducted in a spirit of fair play and impartiality. We're allowing every candidate to have an equal opportunity to express their views, and we just urge you to do so in a civil and polite manner, which I'm sure you will. So I'm inviting each candidate to speak firstly in alphabetical order, and then we'll just rotate the order around so everyone gets a fair chance to speak first or last. And so initially we'll just listen to each candidate speak for 3 minutes, and then we'll take the pre-prepared questions. So if everyone's happy with that, I'll start off again in alphabetical order with Richard Kluwer. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to start by demonstrating the commitment of me and my party through our actions, not our words. Wiltshire was declared the most climate-friendly council in England by Friends of the Earth because of our work. We've already reduced the carbon emissions of Wiltshire Council by 80% since 2015. We have a nation-leading, fully costed plan to retrofit all our council housing to an EPC B rating. That'll save carbon and reduce fuel poverty. All new council houses being built now are being built to a zero carbon standard. We're replacing all the streetlights in the county with LED bulbs that will save almost 2,000 tonnes of emissions and save the council nearly £2 million a year. We've taken action, not in a knee-jerk fashion, but by looking at the problems, working out solutions, making sure they're funded, and only then putting them into place. So what will we do over the next 4 years if re-elected? We'll deliver a climate strategy designed to help everyone in Wiltshire reduce their carbon emissions, giving them the information and support that they need to make their houses more efficient to run, supported by a retrofit industry we'll grow through the Council House Refit programme. We'll provide a blue-green infrastructure plan, which, in combination with a revised local plan, will protect our environment and wildlife. We've already started promoting native local wildflowers to grow in our verges. Otters were recently seen playing in the Avon in Salisbury, and we will continue to give nature space to coexist with us. Where we have to build houses, we will make sure mitigation is provided for nature and our wildlife. New housing must be built to a zero carbon standard, and we'll work with government to make sure that legislation allows this. It's not something the council controls, but it's something we all need to deliver. We'll put significantly more resource into tackling fly tipping and littering, which blight our countryside and harm wildlife. We'll maximise renewable energy generation, both through planning and on the assets that the council owns. We'll put a plan in place, being developed at the moment, to deliver a network of electric vehicle charging points across Wiltshire. This will take years to deliver. It'll require central government funding and huge improvements to grid capacity, but we've got to be ready to start delivering it. And perhaps most importantly, we will not make claims or promises that cannot be delivered or funded. We've got to be honest. We cannot make the county of Wiltshire or the country carbon neutral by 2030. If you look at housing, responsible for 1/3 of our emissions, the best estimates at the moment, it's going to take 18 years and significant government funding to retrofit all existing housing. We've got to bring the public with us in reducing emissions, and that will only be achieved if we are honest with them.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very good timing. Right, I'd like to ask Emma to speak now, please. You just need to unmute, yeah.
Thank you. So at Danny Kruger's climate summit, I showed that in Wiltshire, we have used up our fair budget for carbon dioxide emissions in just 7 years at the current rate. 7 years. So we're on a path to 3 to 4 degrees of global heating. Our young people in Wiltshire are likely to experience summers in Wiltshire where every day is more likely than not to be over 25 degrees, and heat waves will exceed 40 degrees. In this world, climate-related wars and famines will be the norm. Our countryside will look completely different, and our wildlife is likely to suffer terribly, as it will be difficult for species to adapt fast enough to survive. 2 years ago, Wiltshire Council acknowledged a climate emergency, but over half of the Conservative councillors voted against it, and some of them are climate deniers. So what could have been done since acknowledging a climate emergency? Well, Wiltshire Council could have measured and estimated emissions extensively, both public and private, for all of Wiltshire. And then they could have identified how to stop them, for instance, by halting road building. They could have only given planning permission for homes built using low carbon materials with zero carbon heating needs, and only given planning permission for developments on brownfield sites, as green sites sequester carbon. And they could have insisted all new suitable builds have solar panels. They could have provided ultra-fast broadband to all communities to make working from home possible for everyone with an office job, and therefore avoid commuting. They could have organised low-carbon public transport to be cheap and convenient, and they could have incentivised the uptake of electric vehicles. Well, what did they do? Yes, they've changed some of their own buildings, made them a bit more efficient, and changed the light bulbs. That's great. But our house is on fire, and we've thrown the first glass of water at the flames. But let's now start treating this as the emergency that it is. The Green Party will do all the things I've mentioned. So if you want action, vote Green on May the 6th.
Thank you very much, Emma. And next, I'd like to ask Tony Mears from the Labour Party to speak, please.
Hi everyone, and hi everyone watching on Facebook. Good evening. My name's Tony Mears, and I'm here representing Labour tonight, and I'm an Associate Director of Innovation in an NHS trust, just so you know a little bit where I'm coming from. I'd like to say that I'm really proud that it was a Labour government that passed the Climate Change Act in 2008. I'm a little bit worried about what the Tory-controlled Wiltshire Council was doing between then and 2019 when it declared a climate emergency, but we'll put that aside for now. Hearing Richard say that we can't be carbon neutral by 2030 shows that the fairly staggering lack of vision I suppose we're all supposed to be used to by now, despite the fact that it's his council that's declared that we will be carbon neutral by 2030. So maybe we'll get some clarity later on the scale of the ambition versus the reality as they see it. As it was said at the outset, this really isn't a political choice. Taking action is a necessity. We're not here by accident. It's because of a level of incompetence and transigence and a lack of vision that's led us here. Labour will support and foster renewable energy projects, and not just in a transactional, let's buy stuff when we can way and let's make it affordable, in a way that uses innovative commercial methods and looks at the latest cutting edge stuff. Will require new homes to be net zero carbon, will improve biodiversity. Labour proposals, and I encourage anyone, that more than I can say tonight is in our manifesto. You can find it on the Salisbury Labour Party site, on any of the regional Labour Party sites. You can find it on tonymears.com, go and have a read. But our proposals are going to make the county a better place to live in. Investment in the green economy is going to bring new jobs, new opportunities. Alternatives to fossil fuel are going to improve air quality and bring better health. Energy conservation and green energy will help to lift people out of fuel poverty. Encouraging cycling and walking is going to improve the health of residents, and planting new woodlands, for example, can enhance our biodiversity. I think for a bit of context and in closing, I'd just like everyone to understand the context in which we discuss this tonight. I agree with the other candidates, in fact, that actions should be what you trust and not just what we say here tonight. Labour has legislated on climate change positively, and Labour candidates up and down Wiltshire are passionate about the environment and are involved in many community projects doing something about it, rolling up their sleeves and getting tangible actions underway to do our bit in fighting the climate emergency. I'm proud of the vision and practical programme that set out in our manifesto to put Wiltshire on a path to being a better, cleaner, greener county. And I hope that some of you watching agree with me by the end of tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, I'd like to invite Ian Thorne to speak for the Liberal Democrats, please.
Yes, Adam and colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me to be here this evening. Congratulations to Wiltshire Climate Alliance for organising one of the very few debates so far in this election campaign. And it's a conversation and discussion that I completely agree with you, Adam, that should be about building consensus around what is without doubt the most pressing issue of our time. Whoever finds themselves back or newly elected to Wiltshire Council, all of us will have an enormous responsibility to ensure we do achieve our climate objectives, that we don't backslide, and that we focus on all aspects of what we as a council and a community across Wiltshire can do to achieve those objectives. I am the group leader at Wiltshire Council. I thought it was very, very important for me to take part, even though other colleagues and the Lib Dem colleagues have got much greater expertise on this issue than I have. But the fact is, I get it. This is without question the most important issue affecting not just our lives, but the lives of others for generations to come. I think it was Barack Obama who said, we are the first generation to know we're destroying the environment. And of course, the last with a chance to do something about it. And I think has already been touched on, in a few weeks' time, we have an opportunity to elect a council that will either succeed or fail in setting on a path that will deliver carbon neutrality by 2030. I'm proud that it was my party, encouraged by a number of organisations, including yourselves and Extinction Rebellion, that drafted the motion that was successfully argued at Wiltshire Council in 2019. And this should not be about party politics. And so I pay tribute to a Conservative councillor, Richard Gamble, who did an awful lot to persuade enough Conservatives to back us and back the motion on that particular day. It was a disappointment that not one single member of the Cabinet voted for the motion. And I think one would find that the current Cabinet doesn't have a single member who voted for that motion either. I think it was Tony that gave a plug for his and his party's manifesto. Well, you can find the Liberal Democrat manifesto at planforwiltshire.org.uk, and that sets out in tremendous detail our proposals on climate and ecology, and of course, critically, the green thread that runs through all of our proposals in terms of delivering policy across Wiltshire. We'll come on to more detailed responses, of course, to the 5 preset questions shortly. But our focus, frankly, will be to transform Wiltshire Council, to recognise and act on this enormous challenge. And frankly, every employee, council member, and indeed Wiltshire resident will have to play a part. The responsibility for delivering our programme will sit with the leader. And it's a shame that the leader of the council isn't here this evening, because it's at the moment.
You've got your 3 minutes. Just can you wrap up then?
I'm happy to wrap up. We'll focus responsibility on the leader of the council, the chief executive, and that we'll seek an independent audit of the council's performance every year to ensure progress. I'll finish by saying that our approach will be marked by optimism, energy, a total focus on the end result, and a willingness not to take no for an answer.
Great, thank you very much. And finally, Graham, to speak as an independent candidate.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly, please?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Can you hear me clearly?
Certainly can hear you fine. Yeah.
Well, I think you can see what I'm up against as an independent. The question was you asked us to talk about our personal view, but what we've had is a plea from every party to vote for them, which is somewhat sad, I think. So I wish to make it clear that I do not fully represent a political party. I'm an independent. However, I'll give you a flavour of what like-minded independents think. It's obvious that climate change and biodiversity are linked, as they clearly impact on each other, and we've all agreed this is not in dispute. I'm privileged to chair the Wiltshire Council Councillors Task Group, and I can see that good works are being carried out by Wiltshire Council Climate Team and strategies formulated. The issue is, it's taking too long to get through all the drawn out processes. Wiltshire Council needs to demand action from government, who clearly hold the key to change. COVID-19 has showed us all that in an emergency, governments can make changes. So why not make changes now to help us all in the fight against the crisis of climate change and biodiversity? I'm fully committed to all we do, and I mean all of us, and we can do a lot to reduce our carbon footprint and increase biodiversity locally. As far as post-election goes, I already have plans to start a biodiversity and climate change information columns within the Stonehenge Trader and Durrington Dispatch with an audience of over 30,000. I have influenced Durrington Town Council, who are reallocating acres of their river park to return to natural habitat. All of this is with the intention of continuing the David Attenborough effect, spreading the word, getting real people involved by making it exciting, innovative, and most of all, fun. Once elected, I will be bidding to chair our local Wiltshire area board with the intention of delivering a dynamic change to the old style approach. Passion and drive are needed if we are to really reach the people. And of course, town and parish councils. The actions we do or do not take will be remembered in history, because now is the tipping point and our last opportunity to make radical change. For the past 20 years, there have been too many platitudes and certainly not enough action. In summary, I am a believer in action for climate change, especially personal action. I no longer use my car within the village, I use my bicycle. And when shopping, I do not look for items that I didn't know I needed. All power-saving applications have been fitted in my home, and it's been retrofitted as far as is possible. I am considering what to do with my old gas boiler and look to examples from WCA members such as Chris Lange on heat pumps, as they are high on my agenda. I've worked and will continue to work with the WCA, and I'm interested in younger people's views. As always, happy to hear from you. Thank you. I'll leave you with today's quote from David. If we don't do it today, we won't have it tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. And thank you to all our speakers for their introductory statements. We're now going to move into, by the way, I should say to anyone listening on Facebook, do send in your comments and reactions as we go through. Christian and Eve will be monitoring those, and you will have a chance to get those questions and comments raised.
Thank you, Adam. I'm just going to give you a quick update. So we've got 67 people online on Facebook at the moment. Right. We are getting, 33 comments so far. Mel Moden said 22,500 new homes will not be carbon neutral that are going to be built, and neither with a proposed road. And there's several other comments, but I'll keep you posted as we go along. I'm not sure if, I think we're covering housing a bit in as a question, aren't we?
We do have that.
Yep, so we'll leave that to then. But yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Great. Well, thank you to everyone listening. Keep those comments coming. Right. So we're now going to go into the, we've got 5 questions that we sent in advance just to give the speakers something to get their teeth into, and then we'll have open questions after that, depending on timing. So for what we're going to do for each of these questions, I'm going to invite the speakers to speak in turn. I'll rotate round. If you give a very brief and succinct answer to the question, the other speakers can listen to those. If you want to respond at the end of the 5 speakers have spoken, just raise your hand using the reactions button on the Zoom, and then at the end you'll have a chance to react once to the comments if you want to, and then we will go over to Christian and Eva for any comments from the audience or reactions from the audience. Hope that's clear. Obviously, we've got quite a lot to get through, so the aim is to move quickly and succinctly. So the first question, I'd like to invite, they're going to be read out by members of a WCA steering group, so I'd like to invite Graham Martin to read the first question, please.
Good evening. Just to pick up on Adam's point about the Climate Change Committee and the pathway to net zero carbon, they estimate that nearly 60% of the abatement measures will involve societal change. So just to put that context around the question, what can Wiltshire do to speed up county-wide action on climate change? And what will you, and that's it, yeah. So what can we do to speed up action on climate change?
Thank you, Graham. So I'd like to invite Emma to speak first on that, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, the first thing we need is a really radical change in the council and all the council workers to give a proper recognition to the problem, so that I think training for everybody on what it is and what we're trying to do in the council. And then, a third of the emissions come from transport. So we need to, immediately start building ways of people traveling, which don't involve, more and more car journeys. And so we need to immediately stop doing car journeys and looking at alternative modes of traveling and getting safer streets. We've clearly got to do consultations because we've got to bring people with us if we do things, so that it doesn't work having things imposed by the council on people. And then with the housing stock, the Wiltshire Council could use its borrowing powers to help finance loans and grants for people who, would like to retrofit their houses, but many people can't afford to do this. And then on the waste policies, the proposed Westbury incinerator is, it's going to emit for the next, I've forgotten, 30 years or something. It's completely, we mustn't do that. We must look at our contracts with Hills, the waste company. We should do food waste collections in towns. So things that, people see as well, like food waste collections, then people start to get it. So that, yeah, we need to be seen to be doing a lot.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Tony, next, please. So how would you speed things up?
So I think the one word answer is leadership, right? And a kind that maybe has been lacking. So I think probably we can put party politics aside for a minute and say, yeah, declaring the climate emergency was obviously the right first step on that leadership journey. And there's a whole load of practical things that I'm sure we'll hear suggested and that we agree with. So improving public transport, supporting the transition to electric vehicles, the rollout of electric vehicle charging points that Richard alluded to at the beginning is obviously going to be key. The council getting its own transport fleet in order in the short term to electric vehicles and the long term to a blend of hybrids and hydrogen fuel cell, whatever comes online. But the real theme that's the kicker here that needs to happen is that the council has to have a plan that's data driven and science led. And that means establishing a baseline right now with clear interim targets and a plan to get there. And that, as Emma has just said, the data tells us that the major contributors to carbon emissions are energy and transport. So the plan needs to be about tackling them. The baseline needs to measure them. And it's that, what frankly I would consider like fairly basic leadership and management skills that haven't really happened. And that I think is the best place that the council can start following the election.
Okay, thank you. Ian from the Liberal Democrats, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, to stick to the specific questions, I think we come on to some of the wider issues shortly. For me, as somebody that's seen the way the council's operated over the last 8 years, I think what's absolutely critical is that this programme, this project, this critical activity is owned by the leader of the council, is owned by the chief executive of the council, and therefore it plays right into the heart of every aspect of what the council does, both in terms of its political programme, in terms of how it reports to its members, in terms of how it speaks to the county of Wiltshire and its residents. And I think that I touched on it earlier, I think that it's absolutely critical that we have an independent audit of our performance. I think it was Tony that mentioned the need for a plan and a programme. The Lib Dem manifesto makes very clear what sort of plan we think we require. But I think it's really important that we aren't acting as our own judge and jury, that we are inviting outsiders, external experts to tell us whether we're achieving our objectives. And I also think that in terms of the scrutiny part of Wiltshire Council, which should be a powerful part of this process, we need a separate scrutiny function, which again is constantly challenging the leadership of the council to deliver, to ensure that we make progress and that we push this this programme forward. And I think the final point I would make in terms of how Wiltshire Council speeds up the programme is to ensure that we don't have any climate deniers sitting on this council's cabinet.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Graham, for the Independents.
Thank you very much. I do note again that it seems to be very political, not quite really sticking to the questions you asked. So I'm going to answer it directly. Wiltshire Council need to be brave and just take on the task with gusto. Lead the way, show developers that they need to change and how they and how they build. Have one complete plan, not individual plans that don't necessarily link together with no synergy. Getting a clear and positive message out to Wiltshire residents. Act on getting electric charging points installed, it's already been covered. Looking more closely to the task group recommendations, which are welcomed by all of us, and we are all in this together. I will work with the people to make change, understand the opportunities, and I will do that every day, not just at election time. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. And finally, on this one, Richard, please.
Yes, thanks. What can Wiltshire Council do to speed things up? You've got 3 areas of emissions that need addressing. Starting with not the easiest, but perhaps the simplest, housing. We need to make sure we get new housing policy, all new houses built to zero carbon. That means persuading government to change the rules to let it happen. But we also then need to deal with retrofit. You try and get an air source heat pump fitted in a house to replace a boiler right now in Wiltshire. Good luck finding someone who can do it and who can do it in any kind of timescale where you might want heating. So we need to grow that industry. The council has the ability to control what we do with council housing stock. That's why we're starting the retrofitting there. We can grow an industry that will enable us to, starting with 5,400, then have an industry for everyone to replace and retrofit their properties. Industry, trickier. Big business gets it. Small businesses, honestly, are trying to survive. So we've got to find a way of communicating with small business. And if anyone's ever tried, that's not easy. That really is tricky stuff. Transport, much, much harder. The direction of travel with the removal of electric vehicles is a national policy and will address the issue, providing there's grid capacity to charge them. What can we do? We've got to remember our economy is driven. It's a large rural economy. People need to get around. Public transport's great, but it's not the answer for everyone, and it's really expensive. So that honestly is the hardest one, and that's the one where the strategy and the responses from the people of Wiltshire are going to be most needed.
Okay, would any of the speakers like to come back on any of those points? If you do, just raise your hand with the reactions button on.
And Adam, I can go through a couple of comments from Facebook if you like.
Please do, yeah.
Some of the themes that are coming through are this is an emergency and there's some difficult decisions to be made. So some people aren't going to be happy with some of those decisions that are going to be made to get us to carbon neutral. There's a lot of people wanting to do the right thing, but needing that help. So needing that leadership from Wiltshire Council to show people the right way and so on. Some people saying you can get heat source pumps, because I did, and it is possible to get it. Yes, it can be a bit difficult. And needs to be government led is what we're seeing coming through there. So basically, I think we're seeing needs leadership, and it's going to be difficult, but we need those difficult decisions to be made. And so, anyway, back to you, Adam.
Thank you, Christian. Ian, I notice you've got a comment you'd like to make.
Yes, thank you, Ad. I just want to come back to a point that Richard made, I think, in his introduction, and that was the reference to the Friends of the Earth survey. I mean, he might want to correct me if I'm wrong, but the impression I got was that the survey related to the performance of Wiltshire, the county and its people, rather than Wiltshire Council, and that an awful lot of the good stuff that they were referring to was the commercial provision of PV, energy generation across the county. So I'm very happy for Richard and his colleagues, and indeed the county, to claim credit where due, but I'm not quite sure whether it was quite appropriate to claim that particular credit from Friends of the Earth, Richard.
Yeah, well, let's not squabble about claiming credit for things. I mean, that was a couple of years ago anyway. I think that report. Emma, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just a question about the idea that we need more roads. Well, I mean, you know, we're all showing now, we're all on Zoom, you know, we don't need to be traveling so much. This idea that, you know, we need.
Oh, you've just gone silent, Emma. I think we've lost Emma temporarily. Can everyone else hear me?
It's more traffic.
Ah, she's just come back.
So, okay, so it's my point on roads.
We just lost you. Okay, if there's nothing else on that question, we will move on to the next one. So, Tess, would you like to ask the next question, please?
Hi, everybody. So what steps are you going to take to show leadership to ensure the council takes decisive action on climate change? And this includes encouraging the community and businesses to do all they can to reduce emissions.
Thank you, Tess. And this actually follows on nicely from that previous discussion where the word leadership came up several times. And I think what we're looking for really is for you as individuals to talk about the leadership that you will show if re-elected, rather than sort of specific policies, more about the leadership in the process and the way the council operates, please. So I'm starting here with Tony, please.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I totally agree that leadership is the key, and that the council is it is uniquely placed to provide a kind of public leadership that's going to be essential if we're going to get our heads around this. Like I mentioned before, an evidence-led approach based on clear data and a baseline assessment is going to be key. In the nitty-gritty, I think there needs to be a slightly more structured programmatic management approach. So things like a dashboard of measures are going to be fairly vital, but it's also about that wider policy stuff. You're quite right about how town and parish councils are supported, schools, businesses, etc. I think what we set out in our manifesto and what Labour are really keen to do is to engage with stakeholders in novel and creative ways. It's not just about waiting for money to flow from central government and then picking the things to do with it. It's about providing the incentives that we can with our powers for businesses. It's about finding technology pathfinders and offering them a chance to use case their innovations in Wiltshire and get access to that as early adopters, potentially for very little cost. And it's about making use of public bodies that are here to help us, right? It's not just Wiltshire Council alone. There is a whole network of councils who are facing the same challenge in the UK and beyond. And there are a number of public institutions that are around to help. The Energy Systems Catapult, for one. So I think this leadership is exactly the right way to phrase the question. And I think the nitty-gritty is about a much more serious programmatic approach to a series of joined up projects. And the larger vision piece is to just get a bit more creative about the people and partners we pull in to address the challenge.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Ian, next, please.
Thank you, Adam. I think the real challenge is how we engage with Wiltshire residents and the public. And that's not just a particularly easy task, I think, for any kind of authority, whether it's Wiltshire Council or anybody else. So it is a tremendous challenge that we face. I think that, and let's stick with Wiltshire Council, I think Wiltshire Council has learnt a lot, and credit to an awful lot of the Wiltshire Council staff through the pandemic in terms of how they've developed innovative ways of engaging communities, working with communities, and indeed whole rafts of new community groups that have come forward. And I think that we could use that experience and those networks and those mechanisms to really build a campaign across the county that really is designed to draw residents who have nothing to do, no interest in what we do at Wiltshire, but have an interest, of course, in the future of the climate and the future of their environment. And there are things that I think are very important in terms of how we make it work structurally. Certainly our manifesto talks about the introduction of citizens' assemblies, which could look at the budgets, could look at the local plan, but particularly could involve large numbers of representative residents in developing new ideas, developing new approaches. The use of citizens' panels, which provides a long-term way of engaging with communities and so forth. And of course, using some of the current Wiltshire structures, such as the area boards, who rarely, in my experience, talk about climate change, but could be major drivers in terms of engaging with parish councils, town councils, a raft of amenity groups and others. So I think there are some structural things that we could do that really takes this message, takes this campaign out right across to residents in the county.
Thank you, Ian. Graham, please.
Thank you. I will, as chair of the Climate Task Group, and so will other independents, help people to make change, especially in their habits. On average, 66 days is recognised as time for people to change. Golly, that means we could all have made changes before the end of summer. What an exciting prospect. I and other independents commit, not pledge, to massively increase communication with Wiltshire residents, because without bringing them with us, we are not going to make enough change quickly enough. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Richard again, please.
Yes, thanks. What would I do to show leadership? Well, Philip Whitehead was elected as leader of the council in July 2019. The first thing, he appointed me as deputy leader, and the first thing that we sat down to discuss was how we were going to address the whole issue of climate change and policy from the council. And the first thing we did was get an officers in, say, when can we make Wiltshire Council carbon neutral by 2030? And having got, I wouldn't say a definitive yes, but something close enough to it that it was achievable, we put that in place. That's the leadership we have demonstrated, leadership I will demonstrate, is when by looking at the issues that we can fix and finding a route to fix them and then putting them in place. Not just saying, yes, let's go a charge in direction and achieve it, but let's find an actual way to get there. And that is really important for the people of Wiltshire. Telling them they must change, it's not helpful for people. What we need to do is provide a way for people to be able to make that change. And I'll come back to retrofitting a house. Insulation is relatively good, depending on the property you've got, but other forms of putting other forms of heating system there, we don't have enough infrastructure in place. We have got to make sure that that infrastructure is built up, the capacity is built up, and that we then have the ability to provide almost trusted trader lists, however that works out. But also, inside that, we've got to be able to work with government, and we've got to be able to say to government, after the latest green initiative for homes, which fell flat on its face because of the way it's administered, we've got to be able to say very clearly, we as a council could administer this, can provide this and can drive it, and that we can therefore enable people to make their change. I'm picking housing because, again, it's probably the easiest one to demonstrate a way forward. But that is what leadership is going to mean here. It's not just going to mean statements and standing up saying, brilliant. It's going to mean coming up with solutions that will be implementable and that can work for everyone, especially work for the people who are not sitting on vast amounts of ready cash for improving their houses, but coming up with ways for all of us to make the change.
Okay, thank you. Finally, on this one, Emma, please.
Well, for a start, the council should use its own spending power so that all the council spending should go to firms that have low emissions and low emissions in their supply chains. And the calls to tender should be written in a way, as far as possible, local firms could be chosen preferentially. And then it's easier for us to sort of monitor and control what's going on because we can see it, and it gives the local firm an incentive to provide the low carbon option. And then, further, we develop a climate strategy for business by engaging with local businesses and through the Chamber of Commerce and also the NFU, because farming is so very, very important here. Then we'd go on with the measurement aspect. Every decision should look at not just money, but the carbon budget. It should be absolutely standard for every decision to sort of alongside the finances, or even before the finances, we should be looking at the carbon budget. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Would any of the speakers like to come back on any of those points at all? Tony,
Yeah, I just for sake of clarification, Richard, in your opening statement, we can't make Wiltshire carbon neutral by 2030, and then just now you sat down with the council officers and decided that you probably could make Wiltshire carbon neutral by 2030. I think if everyone's being a realist here, they realise that the Conservative group's going to play a pretty big role in the next administration of the council. Do you believe that we can be carbon neutral by 2030 or not?
If I can answer that, there's a distinction between two areas there. Can we make Wiltshire Council, the corporate entity, carbon neutral by 2030? Yes, we can. We're 80% of the way there. The 20% that's left gets harder and harder, but yes, it can be done. Can we make Wiltshire as a county, the entire county of Wiltshire, can we all be carbon neutral by 2030? I have spoken to an awful lot of people over the course of the last 2 years, an awful lot of experts from an awful lot of areas, and in transport, and in aviation, and in housing, retrofitting of existing housing. No one, no matter how committed, how good their green credentials, can tell me that we can achieve that. 2040 is probably as good as anyone with that kind of experience seems to be willing to commit to. Our government is at 2050. And again, it's about being honest. It's about being realistic about what we can and can't achieve.
Just sorry to interject on that, but do you have a sense of where you will be by 2030?
I think the best trajectory is, say, probably about 60% of the way there is on track. I think there are so many unknowns there, Adam. You're asking me to pull numbers out of the air, but the best data, I was looking at some earlier today on housing trajectory, and yeah, about 60, maybe a little bit more, maybe 60, 70% of the way there.
Actually, what we're really asking for, and what the question asked for, was leadership.
Yeah. Anyway,
and no, we can't do it. Probably isn't the one they're looking for.
Thank you. Any other reactions from any of the speakers, or
I've got some on Facebook if you like.
Yeah.
So Anna earlier on said it's time to stop saying how difficult and what can't be done, and actually being inventive and coming up with ideas of how to engage with the community. I'm not hearing that much about ideas of how the community is going to be fired up by the council to do stuff. And I think that's some of the theme of what we're doing. Not seeing this sense of urgency being oozed out to the community. It's all what we can't do, kind of, it's too difficult. And that's some of the theme that's coming through on the Facebook comments. And I think I'll leave it at that for the minute, otherwise I'll keep talking for too long.
Okay, Andrew, from the steering group, very, very quick comment from you, if you don't mind.
Yes, if there was time for me to ask a follow-up question. It would be...
But just a very quick comment, yeah. If you...
Yes, well, I am concerned that there is almost inevitably going to be a public backlash among some people, as there was to the pop-up social distancing and cycle schemes. Now, with COVID-19 measures, authorities have stood their ground because it's an emergency. Of course, this is also an emergency. And what I look forward to hearing from the parties in the next 2 or 3 weeks is how will they handle a backlash? Will they stand their ground, communicate clearly, or will they start backing down? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Useful thought to leave us. Ian, you just one reaction to the previous question.
It was about coming back to Christian, actually, that one has to be positive because we have to win hearts and minds. We can walk in with a stick, but I think ultimately it's about how you engage people in the process. And there are some ideas, as I said earlier, in terms of our experience of how communities have responded so remarkably to the pandemic. Organisations have appeared from nowhere, from some of the most unlikely places. And I think that we need to be seeking to build on that and recreating that kind of spirit around the climate emergency. So I think there are stacks of ways that we can work with people, engage with people, and ensure that the message is promoted, but more importantly, actions and activities take place.
Thank you. Right. We'll now move on to the next question, which is going to be asked by Julian Jones, also from the steering group.
Thank you, Adam. So the question as asked was, onshore wind turbines are the lowest cost of form of electricity generation. Does your party support Wiltshire Council legislating positively for wind turbines? Now, just quickly put that in context. We know there are some technical arguments about the optimum location of wind turbines, but energy excluding transport, as we've been talking about, is a large proportion of our emissions. We particularly need to reduce the energy use and wastage from our heating and cooling our buildings. And I'm not sure whether retrofitting 5,000 homes to EPC-B is going to be enough to prime the market for the sort of 12K a year that has been estimated of homes that 12,000 homes a year that we need to retrofit to near zero carbon standards. So I just like to hear what other measures you're looking at to increase skills levels and what timescales you're looking at for getting started with this.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify the point about when we say about legislating, what we mean is really creating a positive planning framework. Obviously, the council can't legislate, but it can certainly put in place a planning framework for wind turbines and indeed for other forms of renewable energy. So let's start this one with Ian, please.
Thank you, Adam. Well, the answer to your question is yes.
Right, simple. And what would you actually do then to?
What would I do? Well, in terms of wind turbines, the problem that we've had, of course, is that we have a local plan and we have planning policies which are designed to just about completely make it impossible for onshore wind turbines to be consented at planning committee. So I think we have an excellent opportunity at the moment with Wiltshire Council's the latest iteration of its local plan. In fact, we have huge opportunities with that document to go an awful lot further in relation to addressing the climate crisis. But in particular, we have an opportunity to reset the dial, shall we say, in terms of our planning policies and the opportunity to ensure that where it is absolutely appropriate, we should be generating energy using onshore turbines. That's not going to make me perhaps particularly politically popular in some parts of the county, but I'm taking the point that somebody made earlier. We have to make some tough choices, and this may be one of them.
Thank you, Ian. Graham, next, please.
Yeah, fine. Like Ian, the answer is clearly yes. The opportunity does exist, so let's go forward. I don't believe that Wiltshire is unsuitable, and in the past, there are many councillors who thought it was unsuitable, and that may be just the look of having turbines, I think, rather than the output from them. And we could offset by supporting other counties that have more opportunity than perhaps Wiltshire does. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. And next is Richard, please.
Thanks. It's very easy to give an answer here. That is, well, I'll come back to leadership. Day one at Sandhurst, the first thing I was taught about leadership was integrity. Leadership requires integrity, and integrity requires honesty. So first up, we need to bear in mind that with areas of outstanding natural beauty and the New Forest National Park and military training areas, there are significant parts of the county where under any policy, any planning law at the moment, wind turbines are not able to be put. We've got a review of the local plan coming up. Local plan reviews need to be evidence-based, otherwise inspectors throw them out. So what I think, the way I would like to see us handle this is by going out to ask the residents of Wiltshire what they feel about this issue. Judging by my postbox, there are more people in favour of the idea of wind turbines than not, but I want to see whether that's reality or not inside the actual proper local plan consultation, which will occur later this year. And after that, we then need to make an assessment based on what the public are thinking, what they're saying, and what the evidence is showing us about what the policy should be about wind turbines. Personally, do I have a problem with them? No. Am I happy to see them being built? Yes, I am. Is the county that's something that the entire county of Wiltshire is ready for or wants? I don't know. Let's find out through the local plan consultation. I'm not going to sit here and just give you the answer you want to hear. Again, integrity. Give an honest answer.
Okay, thank you. Emma, please.
Hi. Well, I also actually believe it's really, really important to bring local people with us on this, and having wind turbines imposed has could have a terrible backlash that's really bad. So that we need to work out ways, and I think one way is that where there are wind turbines, it needs to benefit local communities. And sometimes in the past, actually, the financial benefits all been to the landlord, who's not to the local community. So we need to make sure that, actually the local communities will benefit too. And of course, I'm absolutely in favour of wind turbines, but, we must make it work for the whole community. And, that's how I do that. And, we need to, with renewables in general, we need to have, solar panels on all suitable buildings. There's still loads of farm buildings that haven't got them, that are perfect. Well, we need to make sure that that happens. And we need to have small scale water turbines in rivers. They're great. So that, and why don't we start putting up solar panels on over car parks, because everybody likes a bit of shadow on the car park and they've got lots of area, so there's a masses we could do.
Okay, thank you. And Tony, finally on this one.
Yeah, so my answer is yes as well. And there's obviously a unique frustration, isn't there, to the idea of that we're all acknowledging facing down a climate emergency, and then anyone would consider, oh, I don't like the look of it, as the reason that we shouldn't do something. So, I mean, I actually quite like the look. I feel like it's driving through the future I want to live, and it's driving through the future I want my little boy to live. Britain certainly has plenty of wind, so it's not like it's a poor choice. Our position as a party is that the scale of the challenge is such that we can't really be picky. It can't really be about, and it speaks again to the question earlier about taking tough decisions. Obviously, there are things that have to be considered, so areas of outstanding natural beauty and their protections. But I don't buy that that this vast swathe of the defence estate is entirely off limits. There are big chunks of the MOD estate, particularly on Salisbury Plain, that would be quite suitable for turbines, particularly certain new technologies that are worth pursuing, such as bladeless turbines. And I completely agree with Emma's point about how this has to serve communities. I mean, there are obviously a number of other kind of renewables we could talk about, where there's been pilot projects such as village heat pumps that have moved everyone off fossil fuel burning equivalents. And I think wind can be a similar opportunity to get a community buy-in to a solution other than what it has now. But yeah, we can't be picky, and it's a tough decision, but I am strongly in favour of, and as is the Labour Party.
Thank you, Tony. Christian, I think I've seen a lot of comments coming through on this topic. Any particular points you'd like to pick up from the audience?
Yep. Most of the comments are pretty similar to what we've been hearing, so obviously mostly in support. There's a suggestion from Maura that, sorry, it wasn't Maura, it was that involve Wiltshire Community Energy if they're not already involved in wind and so on. But I think we're basically saying yes, it's replicating the comments that have been said, so nothing massively different.
Thank you, and great to see that, on the comments that we're up to over 100 participants now. And sorry if we missed the beginning of the talk. Any further comeback from any of the speakers on the points that have been raised on renewables at all? Or Julian, actually, the questioner has got a response, a comment. So Julian, over to you.
Thanks. I was only going to comment that thank you for those answers on the wind turbines, but I was disappointed not to hear more on the energy demand reduction, because that is in the energy hierarchy. You first reduce the amount of energy you're using and then to provide the rest of. I can see Richard nodding there. I'd really, if anyone's got a quick comment about, how we get that happen faster, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. Well, we have touched a little bit on retrofit, but yes, whose hands up? Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, I definitely in principle agree, but if I can then steal Richard's point a little bit about being honest, then I mean, the ever increasing need of particularly data-driven services, which will ever more become public services, does increase. Like extra computing power is going to require extra energy, right? So the challenge isn't just take the baseline we are now, reduce it, and renewable. It's that's a constant upward curve of what we're demanding in terms of energy. So. Some of that's going to be behavioural change, and some of that's going to be commercial change. But there is no easy answer to that, and I would love to see somebody try and give you one.
Okay, thank you, Richard. You've got a response.
Just very briefly, yes, fabric first. All the evidence, all the experts are saying it's fabric first. And that's the approach that certainly officers are pulling together for the council house retrofit program. That is about insulation. It's also then about dealing with how you retrofit listed buildings, which are an absolute pain with Fabric First. You've got to put it inside. There are a lot of things there that can be done, but it has got to start with Fabric. There is no point in it putting a nice new heat pump on a property that just leaks heat, because all you're going to do is spend more money running a heat pump to heat the environment, which is nuts. So yeah, it's an entirely accurate point. The mechanics of how to deliver it are extremely specific to the different areas you want to deliver on.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to the fourth question. So Eva McHugh from the steering group would like to ask this one, please.
Hi, so how will your party ensure a fully integrated transport system, including improving active travel routes, becomes reality for the county by 2030?
Okay, thank you. So we've had a few comments about transport, so let's drill down into that in a bit more detail. So let's start with Graham on that one, please.
Thanks. Well, we agree, all of us agree, that an integrated plan is desperately needed. And I think I've said before that not all the separate plans have synergy. And this is the issue. I cannot offer a quick fix here. But I will say that Wiltshire Council needs to listen more, and we've heard a lot about this tonight. It's about listening closely to the people, and it'll be very interesting to see how they vote on May the 6th. But I don't have a specific answer for that question, but I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Richard.
Thanks. The first thing we need to do is make sure that the local transport plan and the local plan, the two key documents the council has, are actually meshed together to strategically deliver on transport. And at the moment, they are not. The local transport plan iterations have been, in essence, we're working off a 15, 18-year-old document there, and that needs to be updated and brought in line with the revised local plan. We've got to understand what the strategic issues that we need to fix are. So we've got to understand how we can create a proper strategic cycle network, not 200 meters of cycle path in the middle of a town that's getting everyone's back up, but that's enabling people to travel from where they live to where they work and make their commute about cycling, for example. We've got to continue to fund public transport. We fund 99 services at the moment. There is increasing pressure on public transport. Just a couple of ways that we need to address that. We need to make sure that we are looking at supporting younger people in using buses. Younger people are using buses more. They are much more technologically savvy and driven than the traditional bus user. So we've got to use technology so people understand, if I get out of my front door now, in 2 minutes time, the bus will be there. I don't need to stand in the rain. We've got to do that both rurally and in an urban setting. And we've also then got to make sure that we are using smaller buses as well as the large buses, because at the moment, large buses running around in rural areas aren't terribly functional. We've got to change that dynamic somehow completely by 2030. We've got to do more on rail. We've got 3 station projects that are being looked at in Wiltshire at the moment: Devizes, Wilton, Corsham. Again, the opening of them is not entirely within our gift, but we're doing everything we can to push that, and we've got to push for as much sensible rail use as we can. But also in there, we cannot forget the fact that we are a 50% rural county and that people still use cars to get around. So we've got to accept, particularly as vehicles are decarbonised, that the car isn't necessarily the demon in this. It's part of a solution that gives people different ways of getting from one side of the county to the other, or from home to work. And if you're doing your weekly shop, certainly in my family, I couldn't take it back on a bike. The car's pretty essential with the 5 or 6 weekly, the bi-weekly shop, the 5 or 6 bags that come back.
Okay, thank you. Emma, please.
Hi. Well, with the bus transport companies, we need to make sure that they are decarbonising and school buses are decarbonising, so that we need to sort of look at reducing our emissions there. And, having the reliable high-tech services would, so we know if the bus is coming is clearly very, very important. But yeah, we could do better on cycle routes. And where I live, it's too dangerous to sort of, go out onto the road with a cycle. Well, in some places, actually, it would make sense to sort of upgrade some bridle ways to cycle routes, because then, children could cycle more safely. Whereas at the moment, it's completely impossible in many places. With railways, I'd like to add to your list, Richard, Marlborough and Ludgershall, please, as well as the other ones you mentioned. Marlborough, there's been a lot of work studies done on it, and it makes perfect sense, as does Ludgershall, where there's already a railway line. There's other things that, depriming some of the A roads would stop getting some HGV traffic through, which it would, is really important to air quality. And perhaps I'm drifting off sort of exactly the integrated transport system, but I think, we've got HGVs going along sort of through country villages where they shouldn't be. We could look into a taxing car parking areas in business premises, which other councils have successfully done. Those are things we'd look at.
Thank you. Okay, Tony, please.
Yeah, so there's tons of really interesting ideas in our manifesto. So we really want to work with town and parish councils to understand, with local communities, to understand what the demand is for new or more frequent bus services, and work with the commercial operators as well to establish new routes to meet demand, based on the data that they'll hold. Again, we agree that there's a new generation of far more tech savvy public transport users. So there needs to be an IT platform with a mobile phone app that allows residents a simple one-stop service for for finding routes, getting real-time information, etc. Again, welcome on the cycling thing, and I think with Emma as well, the bridleways idea, ideas like that are very welcome. The network of routes needs to be extended. The market towns, between them, working with partners such as Sustrans to help develop a national cycle network within Wiltshire. These are the kind of initiatives that very specifically get at the question. And on rail, Corsham, Wilton for sure. That needs to be thought about. I think there's an open question that I don't have an answer to. That's about improving north-south transport in the county. It's something I'm really passionate about. When my job before this one was at the Space Agency in Swindon, and travelling from just north of Salisbury to Swindon to and from every day, the only real practical option, unless I wanted to make my commute 3 hours, was by car, and that is not ideal. And the county's got to have a little bit of a think about how and where populations are moving and what it does to target the most polluting activity there.
Okay, brilliant. And finally, on this one, Ian, please.
Yes, thanks, Adam. Again, Tony's plugged his manifesto, so I'll plug mine in terms of lots of practical initiatives around cycling, support for pedestrians, public transport and so forth. And it seems to me that around that area, it's all about ensuring there are more alternatives and that the public transport is reliable. It becomes a reliable service, an alternative to using your car, and that the cycle tracks are properly maintained, and that they become and continue to be a safe alternative to the use of the car, and that right across the piece we need to deliver those types of services, which means it becomes much more practical and much easier, much safer to not get in your car and drive. So that's almost the sort of micro level. The macro level, I think, is about, and Richard made reference to it, the things that Wiltshire Council has significant control over, and that is, in principle, the local plan, which should be much more of a strategic document. It's not about simply delivering more houses, which is what it tends to be, but is much more about how we plan our communities, particularly around transport, particularly around finding alternatives to the car. And then at a higher level, I visited Cornwall a few months ago and was delighted to meet the cabinet member for roads, rail and space. And it just seemed to me that, we ought to have a cabinet member at least dealing with rail. I'm not sure we do, certainly it's maybe a trip too far, but we do need to pull our weight and to use our muscle with Network Rail, with the bus operators, particularly around decarbonisation and particularly around reliability and cost. And so I think there are those three levels that combine in many ways that hopefully provide some answer to the question that's been asked.
Okay, Ian, right, we'll have some reactions. Quick point from you, Graham, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it sort of partly picks up on Richard's point, saying that the car's not the demon. I think what I haven't heard is, if you're going to change emissions from vehicles, notwithstanding the fact we're going to get electric, is that you have to change the whole paradigm of car ownership, and you get hints of that. But, you know, the thing to do is to remove people's dependence on their private car ownership. And I think if people had viable alternatives, they would move away from it. And we've heard some of that, but unless you put that as the objective, then all you're doing is trying to meddle with the pieces of the jigsaw. You have to change the picture.
Thank you, Graham. Christian, any reactions?
Yes, we've got a lively debate going on Facebook.
Right.
A very interesting comment made by John Schofield there, referring back to the fabric first approach applied to transport must mean more bicycles, more e-bikes and more cargo bikes. 2-ton electric SUVs carrying one person is not the solution and not effective. There's a fair bit of discussion about we need that infrastructure to provide more choice, so people have the choice whether to cycle or not. And also, then the car clubs is also being mentioned as a way forward, demonstrated by the Nala Valley Car Club down in Tisbury.
Great, thank you. Any reactions from any of the speakers on transport? Anything you'd like to come back on? Anybody? Richard, yes.
Thanks. Yeah, just following up on the issue about cars and people using them or not. I entirely agree. In urban areas where people have got the ability to get to work or get to wherever they're going, we need to be encouraging it. But we also need to bear in mind that with half our population living in villages, villages that could be 10, 15 miles away from work, from supermarkets, you are significantly constrained. Public transport is a solution, but it's an extremely expensive solution to subsidize, and the council does not have the funding to do that without a complete paradigm shift in the way public transport is delivered in that sense. Can that be achieved? Yeah, I think it probably can. It's going to take some massive change away from the idea of big buses running along set routes into, and someone put a comment up about Uber taxis or Uber buses, and the solution is probably somewhere in there. Some sort of dial-a bus or app a bus, or although we've got to sort mobile signal coverage out for that one.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. Let's move on to the final of the sort of pre-prepared questions, and Caris Richards from the Wiltshire Climate Alliance Youth Group would like to ask a question.
Hi everyone. So housing has a big impact on carbon emissions. So can you explain how you will minimise the carbon impact of building new housing? Do you think the current central government allocation of housing numbers to Wiltshire accurately reflects local needs? If not, how would you suggest it needs to change?
Okay, thank you. So we're back to the top again. So Richard, would you like to start with this one, please?
Yeah, sure. It's dangerous asking me about housing. As any council will attest, I have an ability to go on for a long time. Let's answer the main question you gave. Do I think government targets are about just addressing Wiltshire's housing needs? No, they're not. Government is trying to address a housing crisis across the country. It's trying to address crises in London, Manchester, the southeast. It's doing that by building everywhere. So no, I don't think it reflects our needs, but they are the targets we're given. I think, and this is a personal view, that we need to go back to central government with the evidence we've got from the pre-consultation we've just carried out on the local plan, and say to them, we need there are parts of Wiltshire where we need time for infrastructure to catch up, for the house building we've already had, to get infrastructure in place before we start taking the next waves, and to see if there is a way of getting that reduced. They'll say yes, they'll say no. I suspect probably no, but we need to go back and we need to make that as a logical argument based on the evidence we've gathered. However, we have got a need for housing in the county. Let's not kid ourselves there. The housing register, the number of people who are on the list for affordable housing has more than doubled in the last 6 months as an effect of COVID. And the only way, well, there'll be two ways of providing housing. We build it ourselves, council housing, or we get it as affordable housing from development. So we are going to need development. We also have needs from our own population of people who want to stay living in the communities they're in, and issues of affordability. So we are going to need development. Precisely what level, that there needs to be an argument, a discussion with government. What's my view on the actual number? Well, absolutely categorically state we should build the minimum number of houses government requires us to build, whatever that ends up being. Right now, today, it'd be 40,835. The consultation was clear. People don't want more houses built than that. Government, they're going through a process of adjusting planning rules, and those numbers may change as a result, but we should build the absolute minimum. We should also build to a zero carbon standard. And everything I'm saying, I sit on the County Council Network, or involved there. I also sit on the Countryside Climate Network, and we're lobbying government very hard, and it seems to be an open door that we will be getting zero carbon build standards coming through very shortly. So we absolutely need that, yes. I'll stop before I go on forever.
Thank you very much, Richard. Emma, please.
Well, there's also some very practical things which we've completely failed on, so that, you know, we failed to do our local plan early enough. That means anybody who doesn't have a neighbourhood plan that's not within two years of being in date is getting, then developers can force housing on them, which is, you know, we're letting the developers bully us by actually sort of, you know, not keeping our eye on the ball. You know, we need to keep a 5-year land supply, or else developers, you know, can force new housing developments on us. So that, you know, we need to really hold our own on against developers, and that means, I think, you know, getting people in the council who are strong enough to stand up to the developers partly, and to make sure that, you know, we do what we have to do. You know, I don't believe that we need as many houses as we're being told that we need to have. I agree totally with Richard on that. Where we're building houses, you know, we need to build them. Not only there's the zero carbon standard of you know, you don't need to heat your house, but also you can actually choose to build a house which is has very low carbon in the building materials. The actual act of building a house costs a huge amount of carbon, and all the new roads and the bricks and the cement and things. So you know, you need to be, if you build houses out of wood, for instance, they're much lower carbon. So that when you are building a house, you need to build with lower carbon materials. You know, one way to you know, stop sort of developers sort of, you know, choosing to do what they like rather than what we want is actually to do a bit more of you know, building our own houses. So, you know, the council could actually choose to build, you know, houses to its standards if it wanted.
Thank you.
And I think that's what it should be doing.
Lovely. Tony, please.
I fear my integrity in response to this question may potentially prove unpopular. So yes, I agree that everything has to be built to a zero carbon standard. It boggles the mind that we haven't been that way for a long time. So obviously, the next thing I would say is that building housing developments, we're so used to this cram them all in, developers making as much money as they can so they can pay out tens of millions in shareholder profits approach. Actually, building communities can be green, it can be beautiful, it can be biodiverse. There's a to borrow that phrase from earlier, you change the picture, not the jigsaw, right? So we can do this very differently, so that it's not just about a number that we either commit to the minimum possible, but that we commit to a process that is much better. We're really pleased that the council is building council housing, but think it needs to go further. And part of the reason for that is that it's just as viable a stepping stone for people to get on the housing ladder, to have a period of time in some more affordable housing, as it is to rely on living with their parents far more than they should have, as I had to do a few years ago to be able to afford my first home. But the bottom line here is that people need houses, right? The same generation that's just finished trashing the planet is staying in their home that I need with my growing family. So we've got to build some houses. We've got to do it better than we do, but we need them. If we want all these amazing renewable technology companies and projects in Wiltshire, there's some workers who are going to have to come in to do that, and we're going to grow businesses here. That's going to increase the population. We need migration to meet our labour needs, particularly in farming, and that's going to grow the population. There's no getting round, we need more houses. I, for one, am happy to welcome people from the brilliant cities of Manchester and Birmingham or London that have run out of room and can't afford anything more than a garage to our beautiful county. We need more houses. We can do it better. And perhaps my opponents, I'm sorry, Graham, it's going to get a little bit political again, at their stage of life with their probably, I imagine, quite settled housing situations, don't realise how challenging it is for those of us under 30, and that actually these projects are quite vital for our future housing needs.
Thank you, Tony. It's a useful perspective. Ian.
Yes, thank you, Adam. I mean, there clearly is a housing crisis, but the crisis is in relation to the delivery of affordable homes. And that means affordable in terms of rented homes and indeed private homes. And the difficulty I think many people have is that the vast majority of the houses being built in Wiltshire are not affordable to the vast majority of people who live in Wiltshire. So there's a fundamental problem with the model in terms of the type of housing that we are consenting and that is being delivered in the county. The second fundamental problem is, of course, that we are again failing to plan. So we are consenting large housing schemes with no employment, which of course absolutely undermines any attempt for sustainable living. So we're creating larger and larger commuter towns, creating greater problems rather than problems that we are trying to solve. And again, there seems to be a lack of imagination in terms of brownfields, whether they're large or small. It just seems to me, again, if we are serious about the crisis we face, then we have to be serious about the model of housing that we support and that we don't support, the services that that housing provides, and critically, the impacts that that housing has on our environment. And again, just to repeat what I said earlier, we have a local plan consultation and process underway. So there are immediate opportunities to do something about it. There are opportunities to increase the amount of tree cover on sites that we consent in the county. Just for examples, there are many things we can practically do over the next few months that start to make a positive impact. But as I say, there's no doubt at all there is a crisis. But the crisis is in terms of the type of homes that we deliver and the jobs that need to come with them.
Thank you, Ian. Finally, Graham on this question.
I'd just like to bring everybody back, if I may, to the actual question, because apart from Richard, I don't think anybody really stuck to the remit. The question was, do you think the current central government allocation of housing numbers to Wiltshire accurately reflects local needs? If not, how would you propose it needs to change? I say that I doubt the government is wise enough to work out actual needs. It probably divides the houses projected by the number of counties and forgets to consider the lack of local employment opportunities. And so the effect of home to work travel just keeps increasing our carbon emissions. It also fails to deliver homes for Wiltshire residents that they can afford. The point that was just made, and that is really important. In summary, no, I don't believe they reflect Wiltshire's needs, more of the needs of the government. Changing the mood of the government, this needs to be the people's choice, and we will promote change that meets the needs of Wiltshire residents. All I ever see is a ping pong of governments with ideals that sadly rarely mature. Wiltshire Council and all of us need to lobby the government. It's not reasonable to ask Wiltshire Council to take this task on their own. As always, I'm open to new ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Christian, reactions from the floor.
Yeah, again, a nice lively debate on there. One of the earlier comments was around the 40,000. So a bit of skepticism as to was 45,000 set so that you could look good by reducing it down to 40. So was that the scheme in the first place? There's comments around having an under occupancy crisis. There's 25 million spare rooms or unused rooms out there. So there's something wrong there that needs to be sorted out. And the need for smaller houses rather than the bigger houses that we see that aren't affordable. Comments around local plans shouldn't be dismissed after 2 years. They take 2 to 4 years to make in the first place. So why are we dismissing them after 2 years? I'm not quite sure how that works, to be honest. There's comments around the building of the houses themselves. Concrete contributes significantly to our carbon footprint. So that needs to be borne in mind when we're considering the question. I think there's lots of other stuff on there, but that's about it for now.
Great, thank you. So reactions, Emma, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just to say, one of the things which to me has clearly happened in Tidworth is there must have been a tick box exercise for having solar panels on house roofs, because there's new developments and every house has got a solar panel about this size on the roof. I mean, it is completely mad. If you're going to do it properly, but obviously the developer was able to tick the box. So let's just avoid that one in the future.
Okay, any other comments from the speakers on the housing question? Doesn't look like. Thank you very much, and thank you again to everyone who's reacted and commented. Obviously, we can't get through all of those comments in the time available. If you're happy to continue, we would like to have the opportunity to just take a few questions on other subjects from the audience sort of live tonight. But just before we do that, we've got a sort of a little fun exercise now, a sort of quick fire yes or no answer round. So this is really to test the level of consensus. And I would say, you know, despite the differences, there is a reasonable degree of consensus, at least on what the issues are and on the importance of dealing with this issue. So we've got a little sort of a poll for the speakers. You'll see that the questions will come up on your screens in a moment. These won't be attributed, so just answer quickly and honestly. You don't need to think about it, don't need to agonize about the answers. It's just to sort of get a sense of how much cross-party consensus we have on a few of these points. So, Christian, if you'd like to post the poll, please, and fingers on buzzers, please, speakers.
Just as a reminder, this is for candidates only. So it's not for everybody, it's only for candidates. So here we go.
And there's about 9 of these points, so just quickly go through and place your votes. Can all the speakers see that?
Yes, you have to scroll down, which I didn't realise. I was trying to press submit, and so scroll down.
Scroll down.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, there's 10 questions altogether. It won't let you submit until you've answered all one. I have left you a don't know option because some people may not want to answer it. So I forgot to mention that to Adam.
Oh, yeah. Quickly scroll down and then press enter at the end.
And people on Facebook, you're probably completely blind. You can't see this. So apologies for that. I'll read through some of those questions very quickly. Is there a climate emergency? Is the climate emergency the priority? Do you support the Westbury incinerator? Will you include a commitment to all new building housing to be zero carbon, as the council is legally entitled to do? Is the climate emergency a political issue? Do you personally believe we can achieve carbon neutral Wiltshire by 2030? Does the climate emergency keep you awake at night? Should wildflower verges be a highway priority as Highways England have made them? 9 is, will you ensure that all new housing developments have deliverable active travel plans? And the last one is, will you support the idea of each community area board in Wiltshire should be encouraged to have a dedicated councillor-led climate change working group similar to the CAT-Gs that we see about the place?
Right.
Christian, I can't submit that for whatever reason.
Which one?
I can't submit the whole lot.
You've probably got one that you haven't answered. So if you just scroll back, you've probably got one that you haven't answered. If you don't want to answer it, just put don't know. And then we'll go there.
Yes. Oh, I see. You're correct.
Okay. We've only had 4 so far, so we're just waiting on the
last one then. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Graham, if you could submit now, then we should be
I've
there.
tried to submit, but I can't. I can give you my answers if that helps.
Have you missed?
But it won't. I don't suppose.
Okay, that's fine. Graham, I'll show the results, and if you have you can tell us in a second, or just send them in.
Okay.
Okay, right. Here we go. So I'm going to share these results, which will come on the screen. Not sure if it comes through on the Facebook feed.
We just read it out then.
So I'll read it out, and Graham, you can tell us if you agree with the answer. So, is there a climate emergency? Everybody said yes.
Yes.
Good. Is the climate emergency the priority?
Yes.
Lovely. So that's what everybody has said so far. Do you support the Westbury incinerator?
No.
Okay. So you've had and we've had 1 don't know. So we've had 4 no's and 1 don't know. Will you include a commitment to all new build housing to be zero carbon? Yes. Okay, that's good. Everybody?
Yes, from me.
Yes, from you. Is the climate emergency a political issue?
Sadly, yes.
Yes, it's interesting. And the others have said no.
They would do, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah. Question 6 is, do you personally believe we can achieve a carbon neutral Wiltshire by 2030? 2 have said yes, 1 have said no, and 1 doesn't know. What do you want to say? Is it possible?
I'm going to have to go with a don't know, but I'd love to say yes, but I think I'd be, unless we do a lot, we're not, it's not going to be a yes.
Yeah, okay. So does the climate emergency keep you awake at night? All have said yes. I'm asleep, bro. Anyway, do you want to answer that one while we're here?
Yeah, that's a yes. We do worry about it, definitely.
Should wildflower verges be a highway priority as Highway England has made them? Let's see. Yes from everybody on here.
Yes, they ought to do something about the litter, however, Highways England, but carry on.
I tend to agree with you a lot on that one. It's horrible. Anyway, will you ensure that all new housing developments have deliverable active travel plans?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's 4 yeses and 1 don't know on that one. And the last one around having all the community area boards having a dedicated councillor-led climate change working group, similar to the CAT-Gs. Everybody said yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Lovely. I'll look forward to keeping you to that after the election, because that's what we're very keen to have. Anyway, I'll stop sharing on that, and back, David, to you, Adam.
Thank you. That was actually showed a remarkable degree of consensus and much more than I was expecting. I hope that worked for everybody on Facebook, and that you could at least hear the questions, if not sort of see what was on the screen. But that was really quite encouraging, and I really hope that was sincere and that will be carried forward into the next council after the election, because if that is genuine, that really does bode well, I think. Great. So finally, if everyone's happy to stay for a little bit longer, we'll just take sort of general questions from the audience. Again, sort of fairly quick fire approach. I won't sort of control who says what to this one. So just, Christian, if you read out a question and then stick your hand up and.
Lovely. So if someone on Facebook wants to ask a question, now's the time, put it in the comments. Or if someone put their hand up in the Zoom audience, and we'll try and find one. So this hasn't been pre-prepared. So this is anybody who wants to ask a question, put your hand up. Oh, I can't believe it. Someone wants to put a hand up. I'll just give the Facebook is about 30 seconds behind. Oh, Mike, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Wiltshire has some 4,800 kilometres of road. Wiltshire County Council recently announced the collection of 132 bags of litter, along with much else, from just 5 miles of verges in the first of a 9-week cleaning programme. There's about a bag of litter for every 100 metres of raw verge is now normal. What plan do you have to clear the remaining 47,000 bags, or at least 400 tonnes of litter from the rest of the county's roads? And most importantly, prevent it being replaced?
Thank you, Mike. In fact, we've had a very similar question just asked by Rob Yall on Facebook. So who should we go for? I'll start off with Richard. Richard, over to you. Very quick one.
We need to clear the litter on the roads more frequently than we do. I think more importantly, we have got to go for enforcement. There has got to be a greater degree of enforcement, on fly tipping, but also on people dumping litter on the roads. And if that's camera-based enforcement, so be it. You cannot let people continue littering. It's absolutely disgusting right now.
Why has it got to this stage, Richard?
I don't know. I don't get the logic that makes someone think, instead of I'll put my crisp packet in the bag in the car to take home, they just throw it out. It's insanity to me. But it's Richard, absolute insanity.
Richard, you've been in charge for the last few years. Why has it got to this stage of litter everywhere?
Litter always looks worse at this time of year, because this is when the picks are started and all the foliage has died back. We don't do enough picks. When government cutbacks came to funding, one of the things that was cut was litter picking. Okay. It's gone on too long. It's got to be increased.
Okay, I'll move on. Tony's got his hand up, so I'll go to Tony.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And actually, Rob, who's asked on Facebook, is my opponent in my ward, and I note his good work he does leading litter picks in our area. Sadly, I think what we shouldn't be doing is relying on people to do litter picks as individuals. Nor do I think erecting a ton of cameras to monitor our highways is the way we drive behaviour change in a positive way. The government promised a German-style deposit return scheme for glass and plastic waste a long time ago. Funding seems perpetually to be coming. I don't know why we wouldn't do something creative like set Wiltshire up as a pilot scheme to determine if it works, and then at least we've got some action happening in the meantime. I think Richard's probably right on the road stuff. You know, it's really hard to get community engagement to clear litter on dangerous roads. That it's just going to have to rely on the contractors, and sadly that requires funding for sure. But I think in terms of people's behaviour and changing it, I don't think the answer is always just crack down more enforcement. I think it can be specific schemes like a deposit return scheme that will incentivize people to change the way they use their waste.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Any other people on the panel want to contribute to that one? I can't see a hand up.
So just to come back, a deposit scheme is not going to deal with McDonald's packaging strewn along our roads, plastic bags.
No, but neither of you for the last 4 years. So.
Okay.
Any other candidate? So I can't see any other hands up or any other candidates but want to say something on that. So I shall open up to any other questions. Oh, Jez has got his hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself, Jez?
Yeah, hi, thanks. There is a movement to safeguard future generations. We must learn how to be better ancestors. What do the panel think future generations will think of our capacity as being the best ancestors that we could be?
Tony, you got your hand up, but you were just speaking a minute ago, so I'm going to let Ian come in there. So Ian, off you go.
Jess, I think that's a very, very good question. And sadly, I think there are very few positive answers to the question. I think that the only positive thing that one can say is that we still have an opportunity. There is still a slight chance that what we do now can make the difference that I think we all recognise is required. So I think my major focus is simply this, that we have an opportunity, whether it's at the elections on the 6th of May, whether it's over the next 4 years of a Wiltshire Council, or whether it's as communities, a community and indeed the country. And I think that the views of those that come after us will only be affected one way or another by what we do now.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian. Emma?
Yes, well, you know, every one of us has got to do absolutely everything that we can, because you know, and yeah, so that you know, we can honestly, you know, say to our grandchildren and great grandchildren, all the rest, that you know, we really tried, and yeah, so that's what we got to do.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I'm just going to whip through the hands that are up. So Melanie Boyle.
I think that might be a different question, though.
Was it a historic one?
Yeah, it's the next one, next question.
Oh, okay.
Tony just wanted to, I think, to respond to that.
Oh yes, go on then, Tony, and then, then I'll go to Richard.
I also think it's a great question. My first career was as an archaeologist, so I'm very incensed by how much better quality our ancestors have been than we might be now. Also conscious that my son, who is 1, will probably live to the 22nd century, and I'm very keen to understand how he remembers us. I think past populations have planted trees in which they will never sit in the shade, and we could do to take a little bit more of that approach, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I'm just going to go to Richard, who's got his hand up.
Having been talking about realism a lot, I think we need to be optimistic here. The UK has we've reduced our carbon emissions by 40% since 1990. I think the future generations will look back on us when we've been through this as the generation that cleared up the mess that fossil fuels and overconsumption has caused. And I think we've got to be positive. You're all shaking.
That'll be an interesting debate from that one. So I'm going to go to Richard and then to Tess, because you both got your hands up. Interesting debate going on here. Is that all right, Adam? I'm just going to keep going for a little bit longer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, okay. I think it's a follow-on question to the good ancestors one. how do the panel feel about the government's attempts to criminalise peaceful protest? Ultimately, I mean, a lot of people know I'm part of Extinction Rebellion. We have been trying very, very hard to get the government to move on this issue. And instead of responding positively, they have tried through this latest bill to criminalise that opportunity of ours to hold them to account. How do the panel feel about that?
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'm going to who hasn't spoken on the panel just recently. I'll take it to Ian first of all, then Tony.
Well, I think it's a fantastic question. It sort of sits at the heart of an awful lot of what we've been talking about this evening. I mean, I suppose as a liberal, the last thing I want is the government interfering in my right to protest, in my right to speak my mind, and my right to express my views. So I find that what's being proposed really quite shocking. I think that it's absolutely vital that we do everything we can to resist it. I think it's part of an overweening, if you like, policy that seems to be emerging from this government. Sorry, it's getting rather party political now, isn't it? Emerging from this government, which seems to be all about trying to prevent alternative views, alternative opinions. And so I, in a sentence, would want to oppose it and will oppose it in any way that I can.
Thank you. Emma, and then Tony.
Yes, well, so absolutely agree with Ian. I mean, it's sort of like, aren't we going towards a sort of authoritarian state? I mean, yeah, so absolutely, it's absolutely wrong.
Okay, thank you for the nice brief on that one. And Tony?
Yeah, I agree with Emma. It's a hideous autocratic creep, and how we can be criticising the actions of the Chinese government in Hong Kong and turn around and limit our right to protest is the most horrendous hypocrisy. I'm actually hoping that Richard will apologise for it right now.
What's that? Oh, no, I'm going to leave that there for the minute. So
I'm happy to answer, Christian.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I feel conflicted about it. The right to protest is right to peaceful protest is critical, but we have seen an increasing number of protests turn into something that's much closer to a riot than a protest. Government's got to find a balance there. I don't know what the balance is. The balance has got to be something about stopping people graffitiing, smashing shop windows, breaking in, but they've got to be able to protest. I think they're probably going too far, but it's not as simple as it's being made out, I'm afraid.
Of course, smashing things and destroying things is an offence already anyway. So anyway, right, I'm going to, I know Graham, I'm going to give, Tessa's had a hand up for a little while. So Tessa, I'm going to come to you. Then I think, go for it, Tess.
Thanks. Mine's a separate question. So some of you probably know from researching different documentaries recently, the power of using our green space and the soil in particular to take carbon from the atmosphere. So because we're a rural community, I was wondering how you're going to intend to make sure that we're using our space to the maximum efficiency.
Okay, anybody want to answer that one? Emma?
Well, and I think we've got to be looking to our farmers, who I found are fantastically well engaged with this. Certainly, perhaps I'm blessed because my local farmer, George Hosey, has just won an award for this sort of thing with the way he's managing his cattle and his crops. But, you know, it is the acreage of farmland that we need to look at. And, you know, I think, yeah, so we need to sort of work together with the NFU. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, farms are businesses and they have to make money. So, you know, I don't know how much Wiltshire Council can do about that. But, you know, it is looking, you know, it is helping our farmers every way that we can so that they can take the right decisions.
Thank you, Emma. I've got Richard. And then I'm going to go to Mel, who didn't manage to get a question in, but we'll do in a minute. It's a similar kind of subject-ish. So, Richard, quickly.
Yeah, I think we've got to be thinking really hard about what land is used for. We need our food to be grown as locally as possible. We reduce food miles, that reduces transport, it boosts the economy. We need to look at the habitats that we need to preserve, and we've got some pretty unique ones we do need to preserve, and we can't go planting trees on all of them, but we also need to figure out where we can put in more carbon capturing type use of land like trees without getting in the way of those first two. It's got to work together, and that's complex.
You know, that reminds me of the pledge you gave us the little one of these meetings before about having a local scheme and so on. Is that happening?
We do. We're loosely calling it the Wealth of Wiltshire scheme. COVID has got in the way of its delivery, but I'm absolutely committed to delivering on it again. I haven't mentioned the manifesto, but it's in there.
Okay, we'll watch that space. I'm going to move to Mel because Mel did put her hand up ages ago. So Mel, are you there? Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Good.
In Chippenham, we've got.
Oh, Mel, your microphone's breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, keep going.
Sorry. In Chippenham, we've got a county farm owned by Wiltshire Council that is planned to destroy with the housing. I just can't understand this because it's not for profit, so we could use this. Loads of dog walkers, cyclists walk past it that they could pick up the milk. The milk is such good quality, it's supplied to Cadbury's. Would you support destroying these county farms for housing, or would you utilise them for climate change?
Tony, put your hand up, and then we'll go back up to Richard because it is something that the present group is bringing in, I think. So Tony, over to you.
Yeah, so I won't pretend to know a ton about the housing proposals in the north of Wiltshire, as I'm mainly down here in the south. But as I understand it from Labour councillors, there is a potentially greater need to look at brownfield sites more seriously first, and look at a change of use there before we think about building on any greenfield sites. Obviously, where there is council-owned land that is having to have a positive impact on the climate and environment, it does feel a little wrong. But again, I won't pretend to know all of the local politics, so maybe Richard can shed some light.
Okay. I'm just going to go to Ian. Sorry, Ian, because you've got your hand up, and then I'll come back to you, Richard, in a second. So, yeah, Ian.
Yes, thank you, Adam. I mean, it does seem to me an irony. We've been spending an awful lot of this evening, quite rightly, talking about the crisis that we face, the actions that are required, the fact that time is running out, and yet we have this a major initiative, as Melanie says, which will result, an initiative of the Wiltshire Council, of course, which will result in the loss of these vital farms. And one would have thought that in terms of the great assets this county has, and Wiltshire Council in particular, to play into our climate emergency and to play into solutions to our climate emergency, the last thing that you'd want to be doing is building houses on those farms.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So, Richard, what are you going to do with these farms then?
Well, okay, houses have got to be built somewhere if we are meeting government housing targets. Every house you're currently sitting in was once a greenfield. So let's not kid ourselves that we can say this bit's special, we won't build on it, because we'll say it with it about everything, and all that will happen is government will step in and take over development for us. If we can use the proposed for development proposals around Chippenham, and there are a lot of hurdles they've got to get over yet before they come anywhere close to delivery. But if we can use them to master plan a significant area with completely dedicated cycle paths, with zero carbon school runs, with communities that are able to access the rest of the area around them without cars, then to my mind, that would be a lot better than government coming in and letting developers get away with yet more cookie cutter developments on the edge of every settlement where they can make the largest amount of money they can. So do I want to see us do it? No, but if we're going to build housing, I'd much rather do it in a way that is delivering a careful, thought through, proper environment. And we have a chance of doing that with development on the scale that we're looking at in Chippenham and the master planning that could go with it, if it gets through the local plan and the other elements of consultation that are out there at the moment, some of which are outside of the council's control.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And I'm just going to go, last word is going to go to Emma before I hand back over to Adam for closing off. Emma.
We must absolutely fight this because it doesn't make sense on any grounds. So we need to be clever with dealing with developers, much cleverer than we've been, so it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you. And I know I said I was going to hand over to Adam, but Mel's just put her hand up. She asked a question. Let's hear from Melanie, and then I'll hand over.
So Richard said tonight that we can take the 5,000 extra houses off the housing numbers and go down to 40,000. Chippenham only needed to build another 5,000. So if we've done this, the HIF bid goes away and those houses don't need to be built. So we can keep our 7-mile cycle path to Calne, we can keep our county farms, we can keep all the wildlife, we can keep everything on the numbers that were given tonight, and we can make the first step towards the climate change by getting rid of the HIF bid. So can I have that as the first pledge from everybody tonight?
I'll let people put their hand up if they want to, or thumbs up if they want to on that question.
Put his hand up.
Yeah,
I'll happily respond. I'm coming back to details and grabbing the copy of the local plan, which never leaves my side, it seems. The Chippenham additional housing and the consultation isn't the full 5,000, and a significant chunk of the development that will need to come into Chippenham. By taking out the 5,000, even if you took out 3,000 from the Chippenham area, you are not going to get rid of residual housing need for something to be built in Chippenham. Again, this is about integrity. This is about telling the truth. It's about meeting the needs of the area. We are going to need to find housing somewhere in the Chippenham market area.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I've got a feeling, Adam, I'm going to leave it to you whether we pull it up here or if you want to let it carry on.
I will draw this to a close. I think because we're getting on for 9 o'clock now. I know we could go on all night with this, but I think we should draw it to a close. So I'd just like to just conclude with a few remarks. Firstly, to the audience, thank you very much to the 100+ people who are attending tonight. I hope you found it interesting. I'm sorry not everyone had a chance to ask a question, but I hope you found it informative, because the intention of this debate was to inform people, not just the people here tonight, but also the people who will be able to listen to it on the recording, and indeed the people that you can then go and speak to and say, well, I was on this debate and this is what they talked about. Because the key thing is to get the electorate informed about this absolutely crucial issue, so that the electorate can make the right choices. And that's something we've been passionate about in Wiltshire Climate Alliance. As I say at the beginning, completely apolitically, we don't give a damn what party people are from. What we want to see is candidates being elected who are taking the climate seriously and are committed to action. And I think we've seen a lot of that commitment tonight. And I would say big thank you to all of our speakers, because although clearly there are differences, particularly differences over the pace of change and the extent of change, but there is, I think, a genuine consensus that we need to do something about this, and we need to do something about it quickly. And there was a lot of talk there about leadership and taking a strategic approach, planning it, measuring the targets and progress against the targets, and particularly a lot about the local plan. And that's something else that we as Wiltshire Climate Alliance have been very engaged with, because I think if we get that local plan right, that will make a huge difference to the ability to achieve these targets. So I really hope that the next council that's elected not only implements very quickly a strategy that's going to deliver on the climate emergency, but crucially gets that local plan right, because that really is our last chance to act decisively on the climate emergency as far as planning is concerned. So, but I get the sense that there is the right will there. I think there's obviously going to be a lot of debate over that in the next few months with the new council. But the final thing I would say to everybody is, Kristen, do you want to come in?
No, it's just a quick one. All the prospective candidates, or the candidates for the election, have been asked to complete a survey, just so we can formally get their views on things. It's only about 20 odd questions. Richard, it would be good if the Conservative group were to complete them. We're still waiting. We've had about 90 replies so far, plenty from different parties, not one yet from Conservative. So it'd be good if that was pushed out, so that we can get the views of the councillors. It can be found, the link the survey can be found on our website. It's pretty obvious. There's a link to it on the front page. And then later on, people, you'll be able to go to our website and see the results of those surveys, done totally apolitically. It's just a reflection of what the councillors or the potential councillors think. Thank you. I don't know, Richard, whether you want to come back on that at all or not, or why they haven't completed. No, okay.
Okay, that would be brilliant. Yes, we'd certainly like to see those surveys. Again, that's just to help informing the electorate on where all the candidates stand on climate change. So yeah, and the other thing that we're pushing very hard through Wiltshire Climate Alliance is just encouraging people to register to vote, and particularly to register for a postal vote, which obviously is crucial in the current environment. And whatever you do, please vote, and let's get the turnout up so that whoever is elected with a clear mandate to act. And obviously we'll have multiple parties and independents. And I really hope that the spirit that we've seen tonight will continue and in terms of collaboration and working together on this crucial and non-party political issue. So just finally, thank you very much to all of our speakers. I think it has been a very well-managed and constructive debate. And I really hope that continues in the new council.
Thanks for having us.
That's it for me. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.